doing okay. I've just relocated into my very cold office, so had to put my jacket on. So hopefully I'm not going to be shivering through my preach. So let me just hold some settings here because I can't see anybody as I'm at the moment. There we go. Oh, we seem to have some lambs on the screen. Give us a wave, Izzy and Joe. Those guys are in charge this morning while I'm in here. I've said to them, I don't want calling in the middle of the preach to go lamb a sheep, so they're having to get on with it. So yeah, this morning I'm going to continue on the series of Living the Life of Love. I'll be tying into the last couple of preaches that we've had from Dave and Ed, and preparing really for the gospel preach that Clayton's going to be doing next Sunday. So our passage this morning is going to be from Matthew 9, verses 35 to 38, about the harvest being plentiful and the workers being few. Sue very kindly brought that last week, so it's leading quite well into what I was going to bring. So this preach comes under the lifeboat aspects of the preaching series, but before I get into today's passage, I just wanted to spend a little bit of time expanding on the prophecy of the lifeboats, and then we'll look into that passage of Matthew 9, 35 to 38, and how that links into that prophecy. So in Dave's preach the other week, he spoke a little on the functionality of lifeboats and how each is different for specific areas and conditions. Ed spoke on the training and equipping of the body, so i.e. the personnel required to man the lifeboats, and that the one anothering part of the preaching series seeks to build each other up and to strengthen and equip each other for the purpose of the mission. Now that mission we're all called into. The other part of the prophecy on lifeboats was that they were sent out from a mercy ship. And there was a real sense when we were weighing the prophecy that in this case they weren't sent, lifeboats weren't sent out from land, but they were sent out from that ship, the mercy ship. And the mercy ships are sent to places of great need. And before a mercy ship is sent to any place, there's a lot of background work that's undertaken to prepare the way. Teams are sent to a port to assess the particular need for that area. They talk to those in charge and they work with them to produce a plan of how to help and put in the correct infrastructure, etc. In the meantime, the crew of a mercy ship and the teams that are to be sent out will be on board for training. They're equipped and prepared for the particular need and how to cope with that need and how to serve the community into which they're being sent. After that period of preparation, the mercy ship then goes and docks in the port and serves the particular need of the community in which it's to be based. During that time of service, the crew and staff not only meet the needs of the people, but spread the gospel, recruit, train, equip the local community in which it's based to then be able to carry out its work long after the mercy ship's gone on to the next place. So we believe that we, the church, King's Church Kendal, are that mercy ship. Long before the church existed, God prepared the way for it to be sent and planted into this town. We are a church in Kendal here to fulfill a mission. We are to be a people sent from that ship in lifeboats to rescue the lost from the storm that engulfs the world around us. Now, I also believe that there is two aspects to the lifeboat prophecy and the function of lifeboats. The whole purpose of lifeboats is that they and their crew get people to safety as quickly as possible. This is generally a safe place on shore, or if far out in the ocean, it might be to get them to a larger ship with the shelter and medical facilities to bring comfort and safety to those rescued. As a church, we put lifeboats out to help people with their immediate needs in a whole number of ways. There are many ways that we can show love and care that Jesus gives us through the Holy Spirit to those that have great need around us. Most obviously, as a church, that is really seen through the incredible work of the food bank and the immediate love shown to the people of Kendal in supplying food to those who are in incredible need. Now, there's a whole range of social action projects that we can be involved in, and that will bring relief into the immense storms that are seen in the daily lives of people in Kendal and the surrounding area. Individually, we show love to those around us, help and comfort in many, many different ways. All of those ways of showing love to the lost are very important and should be celebrated and encouraged. But if that is the full extent of our lifeboat mission, then we are missing what is the main part of our mission. That mission is not just to show love, mercy, and compassion for the lost, but ultimately see them saved, added, trained, equipped, prepared, and then sent out themselves on the same mission to see still more of the lost saved. Ultimately, we want to see those lost have their eternal needs met, not just their immediate physical or emotional needs. So let me be clear here. I don't want to get the wrong impression of what, or get you to get the wrong impression of what I'm saying. Meeting the needs of the poor and the needy in society are incredibly important. And displaying the love of God in that way is one of the main ways we put out lifeboats to those around us. What I want to be clear on, though, is that our mission does not stop there. It carries on and seeks to see those saved into the kingdom of God. Our ultimate lifeboat mission is to bring the lost back into the safety of the mercy ship, King's Church Kendal, to see them saved, added, trained, equipped, and sent out themselves. Matthew 28, verses 19 to 20, you'll be very familiar with the Great Commission. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you to. Okay, so I want now to move on to the main text of this morning and how that ties into what I've already brought. So Matthew 9, verses 37 to 38 reads, Then he said to his disciple, The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field. So first of all, I want to look in the particular context of AD 30-ish, and what did the job of harvest look like in that time? We can often take a modern view of what our experience of something looks like. We then interpret the Bible based on that view, looking through the lens of our own experience or that of our current culture. Now, these days, harvest is a pretty slick operation. A very small number of people can cover a huge area of very high-yielding crops in a very short period of time. At the time of Jesus, this was a very different kind of operation. So it's important that we understand what that was. We can then understand the depth of meaning behind verses such as these. Now, in 2011, a world record was set in Lincolnshire for harvesting a crop of wheat. Excuse me, the dog's banging on the door behind me. During a period of 20 hours, an average of 85.5 tonnes an hour was harvested from about 400 acres. So that's the equivalent of about 400 or so full-size football pitches. Now, along with that, one person driving one combine with a cutting width of about 12 metres, there would be 4 or 5 other tractors and trailers with drivers hauling grain back to the store, or the farm. Now, depending on how far they had to travel, would obviously depend on how many was involved. But that's an impressive 14 to 17 tons per hour per person of wheat that's ready to go off to the millers and be ground into flour. So we can sometimes think of the responsibility of the church and us in harvesting the lost as a slick operation performed by a small few well-trained and gifted operators, preaching the gospel or putting on an alpha course, and then all we need to do is somehow get our friends or families along to the Gospel Sunday or an alpha course, and that's the job done. It's over to the small and gifted harvest team. But if we look at what's involved in a harvest in biblical times, we then see how actually that's very different from our modern view of harvest. First of all, harvest involved everyone in some form or another, men, women, and children, and then often extra harvest labourers would be brought in from elsewhere. Now, the first job in harvest was cutting the grain, and that was done with a sickle. That's a large sort of flat blade with a wooden handle. It's about 2 foot long, looks kind of like a big hook. And whoever was using the sickle would be bent right down to ground level or kneel on the ground, cutting the grain as low as possible whilst gathering the stalks together until there was enough to then tie another piece of straw around them and make a sheaf. Tying the sheaf was likely done by a second person. When the sheaves had been tied, they'd be put into small stacks ready for collection. Collection was then done either by a camel, which would kneel down, and bundles of sheaves would then be strapped either side of the hump. It could then stand up and carry the bundles. It might also be hauled by a donkey, in which case the bundles would have been strapped across its back. The next step would be to haul the bundles back to the threshing floor, and that was a large 30 to 50 foot circle of hard packed ground, and the sheaves would be laid out in one layer across the floor. They'd then be beaten by hand or trampled by leading an oxen around and round and over the sheaves, and this process separated the grain from the ears. The next stage was to use a big curved type fork, and that was winnowing. And they did this by throwing it up in the air and against the wind. And the grain would then fall down onto the floor, and most of the straw and the chaff would be blown off to one side. Next job was to sift the grain. So that was a big sieve, probably about 2.5 foot in diameter. You'd shovel in the grain into the sieve and shake it from side to side, and the movement would bring any remaining chaff to the top. You'd then blow with your lungs across the top of the sieve, and that would remove any of the chaff, and any seeds or weed seeds or stones could then be picked off by hand. At this point, the grain would be clean and ready for storage, often in clay jars or wicker baskets. So as you can see, the harvest was a huge undertaking, one which involved a very large number of people doing many numbers of roles. Now, every role would have been very important in getting the grain from the standing crop in the field to the storage in the barn. All these people needed to perform different roles in this process, but were all equally important and integral to the harvest. If any part was missing, the job couldn't be completed. So I reckoned up for everybody that had a sickle, and there would probably be quite a number of people in the field with a sickle, there'd be 6 other different people that would be needed in the whole process, right through to the grain then being ready for making into flour. On top of that, there'd be another team, often of the women and children, who'd be supplying the workers with food and drink. Now, all in all, that's 85.5 tons that could be harvested today by 4 to 5 people in 1 hour. By my estimate, now it is an estimate because I couldn't find accurate figures on this, but I worked out it probably take about 1,000 hours, man hours, to harvest that 85.5 tons in those days. So as you can see, harvest involved everyone in one way or another. Everyone had an important role to play, a role that was each was as important as the next. It'd be no good cutting and binding the sheaves if they were then left in the field to rot. Likewise, if there was no food or drink for the workers, then the whole operation would grind to a halt very quickly. So as we come back to the passage and we read verse 37, the harvest is plentiful. Now that's now. This is here. This is now. When we look out around our world, and we look at where Christianity is spreading the fastest, it's more often than not places like Iran, China, Africa, and other parts of the Middle East. And why is that? Now, partly it's because very often people in those places have very little, and they don't have all they could possibly ever need, like many of us living in the West do have. They quickly realize that there's more to life than this. They more easily grasp what Jesus has for them. Now, if we look at our own country, we look back at times when people have come to Christ in great numbers. Very often it's been through times of great adversity, times when they realize that their hope is not in what they've just lost, but it's in something much greater. So now is one of those times. Many are struggling and drowning in the storm of COVID-19. It's time for us to put out the lifeboats and save the lost, the drowning. Now is the time to reap the harvest. The workers are few. Now is the time to send the workers out into the harvest field. Now, that is not us taking a back seat and praying for a combine driver to come in and harvest the crop for us. It's about us. We are those labourers. Yes, we are few. The harvest is ripe. Every one of us has a part to play in the harvest. It's not just about cutting the crop. For some, it may be as Dave was preaching, is getting alongside others and becoming part of their world, building relationships so the light of Christ might be shown through you to them. For others, it might be getting involved in social action, the food bank, etc., to show Jesus' love in how we treat those who are struggling. For others, it might be making a stand at work and not going along with worldly practices. It might be helping out a neighbour. It might be doing random acts of kindness. Then through all these and many more, we have opportunities to stretch out a hand, throw out that life jacket, share the gospel, and see people saved, added, trained, equipped, and then sent out themselves into the lifeboats and into the harvest. So when we read the passage, we are those few labourers. We are the ones to be sent out into the fields. We are the ones who are praying for each other to be sent. I pray that God gives us the gifts and the abilities to be able to fulfill every aspect of the harvest, that we recognise the ripe grain when it's ready, that it is cut, bound into sheaves, transported, threshed, winnowed, and stored. Pray we support each other, that we sustain, build up, and care for one another, so that we may function in and through a beautiful harvest. This whole preaching series that we've recently begun is about preparing, sustaining, and undertaking of that harvest. It's all about God's love for us, our love for God, and the love God puts in us for the lost. As Ed said last week, the teaching on one another is about preparing each other for harvest. The Lifeboat preach is about being involved, supporting, and undertaking that harvest. So moving forwards, there's a number of things that we are going to be doing as a church to help in preparing and undertaking of a harvest. In the ESV, verse 38, it says that we should pray earnestly. And we can all be part of that anywhere, at any time. Praying individually, in prayer meetings, in small groups, on Zoom, and back in person when we're allowed to do so. Pray that God gives you opportunities to share him with those who don't know him. Pray for specific individuals who God lays on your heart. Pray for each other that you might be bold when those opportunities arise. Pray God leads you into new ways to show love in your community. Pray for those who receive food from the food bank, that God's love shown through the gift of food will bless them, but also provide opportunities to share the gospel. Pray for Alistair and Linda and all the other food bank volunteers, that they recognise opportunities when they arise and that they're able to speak into people's lives and share the gospel at the right time. Pray that people respond to invites to Gospel Sundays, and we've got one coming up next week. Pray that all we do on that Sunday demonstrates God's love and that people respond to the gospel. Pray that as we move forward and do an online alpha that all those we invite will come along and that many are saved. Pray as we come out of lockdown and come back to a Sunday morning in person that we see the lost coming amongst us. Pray that people's attitude to church has not only softened but changed completely. Pray that as we move on in the year and we look forward to putting on some sort of nativity, that it engages our wider community and that it shows Christ's love in us, not only in the performances in December, but also all the way through the planning and preparation. Pray that as we move forward, we do so strengthening and building up our church community, that we go into the harvest fields together as one team, bound together with the love for God, love for each other, and love for the lost. So as I come to a conclusion, you might have noticed during this morning's preach that I've mentioned some of the things that are likely to be or are going to be coming up in the months ahead. So next Sunday is Gospel Sunday, and it will take a slightly different format to a normal Sunday. So please pray for Clayton during the week as he prepares the gospel message, and pray for opportunities to invite people along and that God will soften the hearts of those that we invite. Now, we're also working on starting an online alpha in the coming weeks. And there again, please pray for people to invite and that there will be a keenness for people to come along and take part. And we'll be giving you more details on alpha in the next couple of weeks, but that's aiming to start in the next month or 5 weeks. The Nativity. Seems a long way off, does Christmas, but we know from having put on a live nativity in December 2019, it takes an awful lot of planning. For those of you that have not been amongst us since we did the last one. We put on a live nativity which saw about 1,000 people attend and hear the gospel preach. And we're just at the beginning of planning and praying about doing a nativity at the end of this year. This year is likely to be a very different kind of production than we did last time, as we're going to have to plan around not gathering large groups together at any one time. Our aim, however, is still to be able to reach a similar amount of people with the gospel. So this is a huge opportunity to involve the whole church in reaching the lost and also strengthening our community. And the date for your diary is the 11th and 12th of December. So get that written in. Anybody that works on a Saturday and Sunday, get the time off booked, please. And please pray for all those that are involved in the initial planning, that and we'll be letting you know how you can help in the coming weeks, because there will be lots and lots of opportunity to get involved, not just on the weekend, but on the lead up to that time. So that's it for this week. And so yeah, loads and loads of things to be praying for there as we prepare to go out into the harvest field. Back to you, Dave.